Bringing today's Raleigh Transit Authority meeting to order, December 8th at 3:33 p.m. We will start with introductions, starting to our left.
LaPonda Edmondson.
Nathan Spencer.
Tululupe Omokaye.
Jennifer Truman.
Bryce Connors.
All right, thank you for that. And I know that we have to do some approval of minutes from October and November. Those were sent out just yesterday.
That's correct, yesterday afternoon. So we certainly understand if you haven't had time to review those, but we did get those out quickly too.
Has anybody had a chance to review?
I've had a chance to review. I do have a correction. So I was not able to make it to the previous November board meeting, but it has that I was attending.
Okay.
So that's a
I think
correction.
we did catch that, and then we did, since we just sent it out, I think
Okay.
we did catch that. But,
Okay.
But we do appreciate that, yes.
All right, are there any other amendments to the minutes from October or November for those that read it? And you said you haven't read it?
I haven't read them.
Okay. So would anybody like to make a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve. I'll second.
All right, so it's been moving properly seconded. Let's do them one at a time. So all who approve the October minutes, please say aye.
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 All right, October minutes have been approved. All who approve the November minutes, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right, the October and November minutes have been approved. All right, are there a couple revisions to the agenda, David?
Yes, so. We do have one add to the agenda wherever the body would like that. We would like to discuss a draft letter regarding the board's vote regarding returning to fairs last month. So that letter was sent out. That is just a draft letter, it's a starter point. It's just a starter point, my apologies. And so you certainly can make edits to that, recommendations. We don't have to get that completely finished today. But I think that it would be a good idea for us to get that moving to council if the board so likes, pretty early in the year, as budget deliberations will actually start pretty quick in calendar year 23. So anyway, just wanted to put that out there. Again, that letter was taking all of the information that we had gathered. I did receive one email with additional thoughts regarding things that might need to be in that letter. So staff will certainly work with the board. If the board wants to take up that themselves and develop the letter, that's fine as well. Again, staff is here to support in any way that you need. Let us know.
All right, thank you. So we will add the letter to, let's go ahead and get that out the way before we get into the rest of the action items. Do we have any public comments so far?
Yes.
We do. How many?
There's 5 last time I looked.
Okay. So then let's jump straight to the letter. Has everyone had the opportunity to read it? Thoughts, discussions on the letter? I like it. I mean, I think it reads well as is.
I do think that was an opportunity probably for us to include some additional information around what other cities that had suspended fairs in the past and have returned to fairs, what that has looked like. So for like example, LA, they brought back their fairs earlier in the year. And the clear point being that the reason that fairs were suspended in the first place was to avoid having to accept money from the front, knowing that passengers would now be coming from the back. So I think for it to be clear that, it's be very clear about what our messaging is and that we're supporting that with data and examples may help it to come across as not being biased in our opinions. So that's my only recommendation.
I agree that adding more data would be good. Anybody else?
I second that.
All right, so I think that it sounds like everybody is comfortable with the letter as written, but we want to add some data points to it. And I know Karen wanted to add some statistics around what it was without, all the other services that we had, fare free and things of that nature. So if we can maybe add something in there to that effect, just to let them know that we are going off of, it does say that we deliberated and we, took our time on this, but that we're going off of data.
Yes, staff can certainly do that, as well as I do think it would be a good idea to provide some background and context of the original purpose and how that evolved over time. So, thank you.
Yeah, fair, thank you. And that's not something that we need to wait for a meeting to approve to go with.
I would get out a final copy to the body, and we would request comments within 24, maybe 48 to 72 hours. And then we would send a final, well, hopefully if we didn't get any responses, but hopefully that iteration wouldn't occur but more than once or twice. But, when we felt confident we had the final draft, we would send that to this body. And then at that time, we determine, exactly how that would be transmitted to council. And so that's something that we'll discuss as well. And that would certainly be up to the chair. That could actually be at a meeting, or we can just actually send that to the council office itself via, an email distribution or hard copy.
Okay, thank you. All right, and we are at, what time is it?
It is 3:40.
Do you think that we can go over the action item to review the operations maintenance contract in 20 minutes? Or can we go ahead and do public comment early?
I would, what is your time period on that? Presentation's probably 10 to 15. Yeah. And then you would have, question period. So if you weren't finished within the normal 4 o'clock period, you certainly would between 4 and 4:45, I would say, for sure.
I
Or
don't know
4:15,
this
that
for
is,
sure
sorry.
because I haven't looked at the list, but I have a feeling that some of the public comment is regarding the contract, so it might make sense to listen to the public comment before we make any action on anything.
All right. So let's go ahead and call the meeting to adjournment very quickly at 3:41 and open the floor for a public comment.
All right, I would, with that, just make sure that you are aware of the section 1.4 from the RFP that was provided on the table there. And so section 1.4 basically just, reminds everyone that this body is an advisory body to council, which actually provides the final adoption or execution of a contract that would be forthcoming. So again, we would take a recommendation from this body to council. Until a final contract is executed, this is a live procurement. So we just want to make sure everybody does treat this as it is a live procurement at this time.
Okay, perfect. All right, so it looks like the first person we have for public comment is Mr. Jacob Downey. Or was that sent in? Okay, it says, on Friday morning, December 2nd, I needed to take the bus to Wake Med on New Bern. It was the outbound number 15 that departed Go Raleigh at 7:37. I think the bus number was 2216. The driver made time to acknowledge every passenger regardless of where they boarded, double-checked the ADA equipment, made sure not to leave any stops with the scheduled time early, or drove confidently and safely. Your drivers generally do a great job, but I thought someone should know he was going above and beyond and that it was appreciated. Thank you all for doing your job. That's awesome. Do we know what the driver's name was?
Mrs. Shannon Ty.
Shannon Tide. Thank you, Ms. Shannon Tide, for being amazing. Mr. Shannon Tide, thank you for being amazing and a great representation of our operators. Is it, I'm sorry, I can't read this handwriting. Is that a Rachel Wells? Rachel Wells? Thank you. Please come to the mic and state your name and email address.
My name is Rachel Wells. My email address, rwells@teamsterslocal391.org.
Thank you.
I'm a representative of Teamsters Local 391. I work with the paratransit drivers for Go Wake Access and Go Raleigh Access.
I just want to say for the record, I'm not sure that this is appropriate. This body is a referring body. So from a procurement standard, it does get into a gray area that I feel uncomfortable with. But you can proceed as you wish. Again, it does state that while this is a live procurement, the city of Raleigh reserves the right to disqualify any firm that contacts a city official, employee, Raleigh Transit Authority member. So during an active live procurement. So again, we have not made a recommendation. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that before we go any further.
Just a point of clarification, though, is the Teamsters applying to operate?
So Teamsters is under a current contractor, MV Transportation, which is part of this contract.
Are they, okay. So they're applying, they're in the RFP process,
That is correct.
but, okay, got it.
I don't know that we're in the RFP process. We represent the drivers that work for MV Transportation, but we're not in the RFP process. We're not applying for a contract with the city or with the county. We are sharing our observations and concerns about the companies.
I would agree. I would
Yeah.
agree. Under her scenario, she is fine. My apologies. I thought I got crossed up because I was
That's
thinking
okay.
representative from a contractor.
Oh.
So again, contact from a contractor during this open process would default as just stated. Certainly anyone, and even a contractor can talk. They just can't talk about the procurement. If they want to say their name and what they do and things of that nature, certainly this is an open free speech forum. That's what this is for, or a limited forum. But again, she is correct. My apologies. I was thinking that we were getting to a gray area, and you are completely correct. We are not. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the paratransit drivers have been members of Teamsters Local 391 for at least 15 years. We appreciate the City of Raleigh transportation staff, especially David Eatman and David Walker, and you, the Raleigh Transit Authority Board members, for your thoughtfulness and inclusion of stakeholders in the process of selecting a company for management, operations, and maintenance of Go Raleigh Access, and Go Wake Access. We recognize that this is not an easy process and you have a tough decision to make. Desiree Smith, Teamster Steward for Go Raleigh and Go Wake Access, and I attended presentations, interviews of the 4 companies who provided a bid during the week of November 14th. I provided our union's feedback to David Eatman, David Walker, and to all of you. I shared that after attending the presentations and listening to answers to our members' questions, we feel that MV Transportation is the best company for the contract. There are many reasons why we are supporting MV Transportation. Our union has found MV to be responsive to their employees, to have good labor relations, provide appropriate corporate support, and commitment to creating a positive work environment. MV and our union members have worked collectively together to raise wages, promote safety, improve working conditions, and resolve driver concerns. MV was the only company whose bid proposal includes 2 GMs, one for Go Raleigh Access, Go Wake Access, and a separate GM for Go Raleigh, which I believe is beneficial for 2 reasons. There are 2 different unions and bargaining units, and each GM specializes in the services being provided. MV was the only company that emphasized drivers' wages and recognized that drivers' compensation needs to increase. The City of Raleigh and Wake County have talked about the importance of employees' pay and benefits for years. Our elected City Council and County Commissioners have set a standard for providing employees with living wages. This should include employing contractors who bids reflect competitive pay rates and who are committed to a race to the top for employee compensation and benefits. We have concerns with other companies who have bid on the work. We are aware of the concerns with Transdev for the Go Raleigh service. We are concerned with Keolis' lack of experience in North Carolina and history with labor unions. And we are extremely concerned with RATP Dev's plan to subcontract out the entire Go Raleigh Access and Go Wake Access paratransit work to another company. Our members, the paratransit drivers, would not be employed by RATP Dev, but by another company. We have not heard of the subcontractor that they plan to use, nor has anyone that we've spoken to. RATP Dev did not include the subcontractor in their presentation. They did not present the subcontractor's management team, and the subcontractor did not answer our members' questions. With the entire Go Raleigh Access and Go Wake Access work being subcontracted to another company that works for RATP Dev, not the city of Raleigh or Wake County, it doesn't seem like RATP Dev is the right choice. I recognize that this is your decision to choose which company you want to hire to do the work for the city of Raleigh and Wake County. But this is also the drivers' livelihoods, their jobs, their community, their employer. They are the people who will work for the company you choose. Teamsters Local 391 members support MV Transportation for the contract. We appreciate your consideration. And I do want to say that this is a great group of drivers. There are some that have worked doing the paratransit work for Wake County for 20 years. And so I know this is this is a recommendation that goes down another process, and I know that the city has a lot of tough decisions to make, but I appreciate your time and your consideration. Thank you.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? Okay, good. Thank you for that. All right, the next person is Desiree Smith. Thank you. Please come down to the podium and state your email address.
My name is Desiree Smith. Email desi.smith85@gmail.
All right.
Okay. First of all, good afternoon. So, my name is Desiree Smith, and I'm a member of the local Teamsters 391. I'm the current shop steward and BTW at MV Transportation, Division 61. I want to start off by saying working at MV Transportation has been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. It's a blessing to work in an environment where the culture is diversified and centered around family values. From management to the drivers, the atmosphere is filled with hardworking people with the same vision to deliver the best customer service experience with industry-leading safety, reliability, and innovation. I have worked at MV Transportation for 4 years. During this time, I have been able to see the company create a lot of opportunities for drivers for the better. By doing so, it has allowed us drivers to be more efficient in providing safe, reliable, and affordable transportation to all passengers. With these remarkable changes, we have been able to get back fully staffed with individuals that mesh well with MV's culture. You may ask what MV culture is. The culture is family-oriented, customer-focused, and employee-centered. With these three traits, it has allowed management, dispatchers, and drivers to complete each task we are responsible for effectively. I am honored to write this letter of support for a company that is more like a family. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Robert Smith. Oh, okay, no problem. Next up then is Mr. Terrence Dewberry. Please come to the podium and state your name and email address.
My name is Terrence Dewberry. Email address is todewberry@aol.com. It may be the last one, but AOL.com. I came to support our sister Rachel and the Teamsters. We've been in communication, as well as some other individuals. We met with several contractors, and I'm not going to draw out a long speech here. I support everything that Rachel said as far as with the MV Transportations. I think they would do a wonderful job. They were one of the leading candidates, according to ATU, when we did the interview process. Second of all, I'd like to thank the board for doing this and putting this in place. David Walker did a wonderful job with the interviews. The questions were right on point, and he chose the right ones because what we're trying to do is grow this transit company system, and we need to learn how to train and retain employees. And that's a very important thing. We want to grow, and we're in support of growth, and we're in support of MV transportation. Thank you.
All right, the next person is Mr. Dwight Spencer. Please come to the podium and state your name and email address.
Speaking to Mike.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dwight Spencer, and I am the proud Chief Executive Officer for North Carolina Transit Workers Association, the new voice and transit advocate for bus operators and behind-the-scenes transit workers across North Carolina. And first of all, I didn't even come to warn anything, Madam Chair. I just came to commend y'all for an outstanding job, especially to you and Vice Chair, Mr. Spencer. I want to say I commend you. And Ms. Karen, who is not here, and the other members, I think you've done a great job. North Carolina Transit Workers Association, we have been in existence for 2 years, and we have steadfast. I want to pass this to you. This is some of our brochures. Just a little bit about us, a little bit more about us. We've been steadfast about the way the Raleigh Transit has been going over the past 3 years or so. We have been very persistent on what we felt like, how Raleigh Transit can be much better. And I'm standing here today with a smile upon my face that I'm trying not to let show too much. But I do want to commend y'all for listening to the bus operators from Go Raleigh and the behind-the-scenes transit workers from Go Raleigh. You heard their cries, you heard their pleas month after month after month. Madam Chair, I've seen tears roll down your beautiful cheeks at some times from listening to these bus operators and what they was going through by the present company in which they is employed by. It touched my heart in the phone calls and emails we received. And you know, sometimes I got to the point I got so angry, disappointment, because we as a city allowed a company to do this to our bus operators who serve the citizens of Raleigh and Wake County. But I do want to commend you because you held this very same company, even though your hands was tied because of certain things you could not do because of the BRA that they have with ATU. But you did hold the company accountable. That says a lot for y'all as a body who was appointed by the city council. So I commend you all for your outstanding work, okay? We don't really care who the management company who be awarded this contract, but we do want a management that's gonna listen to these bus operators, that's gonna listen to these transit workers, that's going to respect them and respect the positions and the career that they are in. This is what we want. And we are looking forward to working with whoever be awarded this contract. We're looking forward to working with them as far as our outreach educational program. And I never got a chance to thank Madam Chair in public for attending our lunch and learn session at Mary E. Phillips, along with Mr. Walker was there and Morgan. What was Morgan's last name? And Ms. Morgan Simmons did a presentation on behalf of the city of Raleigh. Thank you. And if you don't mind, Madam Chair, I've already extended the invitation to the Vice Chair to attend the next one, okay? But we are taking transit into high schools and allowing high school students to get a better glimpse of the transit globe. So we'll be doing that in February and March. But we want a company that's not only going to serve the citizens of Raleigh and make Raleigh look good as far as our transit concerned. We want a transit management company that's going to support and protect these bus operators and transit workers, because our first objective is them and listening to them and make sure that their voices are heard. And we're willing to work with any union. I want to make it very clear before I take my seat that it's because of this NCTAA because of where we are at today. It's because of us that we spoke out, we opened up the can of worms, we watched the worms come out of the can. And I respect y'all as transit authority members. I don't give credit to anyone else, the ATU union, the Teamsters union, or anybody else. We stay persistent, and we want y'all to know that. And I feel like now that our hard work and persistence is paying off. And we're gonna work with transit staff of Raleigh, as well as transit all over across the state of North Carolina. So thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, members, for an outstanding job. And Mr. David Eaton, I'm even going to pay you your props today. You are the transit architect for the city of Raleigh. Thank you for all your hard work. And Mr. David Walker, thank you for leading a team that's going to make a good recommendation on today of who will govern the city of Raleigh Transit. Okay? Thank you so much. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you. All right.
One more thing. I do want to acknowledge my director, my executive director, Mr. Herbert Chavers. Will you stand, raise your hand, Mr. Chavers? He's our executive director. And by the way, we also established our first political action committee. We put out our first endorsement slate, so we are now officially known as NCTAA PAC, and 90% of the candidates that we endorsed in the 2022 midterm election, they all won. Thank you.
All right. So we will now call this meeting back to order at 3:59. And let's just jump into the recommendations for the contract award.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have Mr. David Walker, which is going to run us through a presentation, and we'll both be here available to answer any questions. First, I would just like to say that these short little period of time that we're going to sit here and watch this presentation represents 8 months of work, and that does not include the several months, 2 or 3 months of RFP development that took place before that, because this is a new contract structure for the city of Raleigh. The city of Raleigh bought out a private transportation firm in the 70s. And when FTA funds became available, that's when the city of Raleigh actually, or the urbanized area, broke 200,000 population, and FTA funds became available to this area directly. So hard to believe, since that time, we've used that management fee structure. So this was a learning curve for us, a lot of research, and I would just give all the credit to David Walker and his team for putting all this together. So, but David has a presentation for you, and I'll let him get started.
All right. Good afternoon, David Walker, Transit Division, and we'll just get right into it. So this RFP is for the transit operations and maintenance of our Go Raleigh Access programs. Wake County decided to join in and make this a joint procurement, so Go Wake Access is also part of the procurement. Obviously, Go Raleigh provides our fixed route services and future BRT services. Go Raleigh provides the complimentary ADA services on behalf of the City of Raleigh, and Go Wake Access provides Medicare, senior citizen trips, and rural general public door-to-door service. Potentially, the winner of this contract would also provide future microtransit service. Why is this service contracted out? We've had representatives from both of the unions here already today, so we won't get a whole lot into that. But cities and municipalities are not allowed to negotiate with unions per North Carolina General Statute, Chapter 95, Article 12. So we have presented the review panel once or twice already, but just a recap. We had a very diverse group of transit professionals, 6 in total, 2 from the City of Raleigh, 2 from Wake County, 1 from Go Triangle, and 1 from the town of Cary. I will say that this review panel spent quite a bit of time reviewing proposals and meeting and sitting through interviews. So it was not a quick nor easy decision that was, came to when it came down to submit the bid tabs. We received over 300 questions from the 4 different proposers that we ultimately received proposals from. That equated to about 50 pages of text responding to those questions. We provided literally hundreds of additional pages of supporting documents to make sure that anybody that was interested in proposing had all of the information that they needed in order to provide good pricing proposals. Yeah, we did, as I said, interview all 4 of the proposers, and it's already been mentioned that we did those interviews the week of November the 14th through the 18th. After each individual interview, the review panel stayed in the room after all others left and had an immediate debrief on each individual company. After the final interview was held, we then scheduled an additional meeting to sit down and then have a conversation about all 4 and compare our notes and compare all of those things that we felt were critical, such as the local management that was being proposed. We reviewed the financials and cost proposals. Those were scored per predetermined evaluation metrics. We checked references. The City of Raleigh and Wake County both acted as references for the 2 incumbents, in addition to those references that we received from the proposers' companies that they provided for us. The review team ultimately did have an overwhelming consensus on the final scoring and the ranking. I do want to say that no outside information was used or considered during our deliberations and conversations about this review. It was purely a technical review of the proposals. It was, taking into account the presentations that were made. It was taking into account the resumes of those individuals proposed as local staff. We didn't take any outside information. Everything was kept internal. And so the ultimate bid tabs did rank the 4 companies, as you see on your slide, with RATP Dev being the overall top scoring company. Obviously, you can read them off there. I won't read them, but that's how the scoring went. Just some comments that we put together on RapDev from the review panel. Everyone thought they interviewed very well. Their local management team proposed, did most of the presenting, which gave the review team a very good feel for the candidates that will be in control and managing the properties. It was a diverse management team. RATP Dev is a very employee-focused company, and when we did our reference checks, we did get that exact comment from most of them when we got those comments, those references. They do provide a very high level of corporate support. They proposed in their proposals a minimum of 31 trips from their corporate staff over the course of the first year, and then that typically will continue in similar fashion in the out years. RATP Dev is familiar with North Carolina. They hold contracts in Charlotte, Asheville, Buncombe County, and they recently took over the contract in Greensboro. We did talk to Greensboro since that was a fairly new contract, and they've just recently finished the transition process. And I'll have to say, David and I participated on that call. They essentially gave a very glowing response in reference to RATP Dev. Their pricing was competitive, but not conservative. And again, they were the highest overall scoring company in the review process by the review team.
David, if you could go back real quick, I just wanted to add 2 quick things there.
Sure.
Competitive but not conservative. When we're dealing with these types of bid structures, it's very much like a bid for a construction contract. So with a construction contract, you get an engineer's estimate. And that engineer's estimate, basically looks at market rates and the volumes that you're going to build, and they have just that, a construction estimate. And so when you get a bid that's really below that, it scares you a little bit because you're like, wow, how are they doing this so cheap? Are they going, are they going to be change orders? Are they using inferior products? What are they doing? So we kind of do the same thing in this process. So all that's saying is they were very competitive within their range or within all the bids, but they weren't conservative either. So that doesn't mean that we didn't think with their pricing that they left anything out or were malicious in their pricing or anything of that nature. So I just wanted to explain that because that's a little bit vague if you haven't looked at that language in that way before. One other element, we did hear some comments earlier about that bid and the paratransit services being subcontracted. RATP Dev was the only company that proposed meeting our DBE, our Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, a goal of 13%. Since it is a labor contract, the only way that you can do that would be to use a DBE for your labor. So they did propose to allow a DBE to do the paratransit component, labor component, but that DBE would follow all of the same rules, regs, policy, collective bargaining as the overall group. Now, we do have the option to not do that, so the DBE portion is by us something that we can do, or we can't, or we, if the board says, we shouldn't do that, then that's certainly an option as well. But just wanted to explain that that did come from staff's request to meet a 13% DBE goal, and they were, yes, I'll just leave it at that. They did meet that request.
I do have a couple questions, but I'll wait until the end.
And sorry, David, didn't mean to interrupt too much there.
No, you're fine. I'll just follow that up with all three of the other companies did propose DBE options. None of them met the full 13% requirement. It is a goal, so it doesn't have to be done, as David said, but if we wanted to exercise that option, we certainly could. If it's more important to not have that concern, that's something that we could easily negotiate in the final contract. So what would the timeline look like moving forward? This will assume an approval today by this board and recommendation up to City Council. If that doesn't happen, then this timeline would obviously look a little bit different, and we'll have to figure out what that is. But assuming an approval to move forward today with RATP Dev, we would release a city manager's update tomorrow to notify City Council. We are scheduled to do a Transit 101, so to speak, with City Council on next Tuesday, the 13th. So we'll give them that information, and then again, depending on what the board determines today, we'll include that information in the proposal or the presentation to council. We would plan to bring this to City Council on January the 3rd for contract award. Since this is a joint procurement, it will also be moving on a similar path within Wake County. And I will say that Wake County is on board with this final recommendation from the review team as well. So they would be taking this at either their first or second meeting to the Wake County Board of Commissioners in January. And they actually meet on the same days as City Council, so either the 3rd or the following meeting, I believe it's the 17th. Assuming notice to proceed early in January, RATP Dev would begin transition on-site work early in February. And I just got some updated information today. They anticipate that they would be able to actually start services in April and then May, respectively, for the Go Raleigh Access, Go Wake Access program in April, and then the Go Raleigh program in May. What would we be doing in the interim? We would be working with RATP Dev in Wake County, developing the final contract language, including liquidated damages and incentives that would be added, within the contract. Obviously, we'll be collecting all of the federal procurement documentation that's required to include on the contracts. The estimated contract value for this over the 5-year term for all three agencies is a little bit over $340 million. So this is obviously a big decision. It is a lot of money. For Go Raleigh, fixed route services, that equates to about $218 million, about $80 million for Go Raleigh Access, which does include all of the taxi providers' pass-through cost, and then about a little over $40 million for Go Wake Access.
I would just also say that certainly our taxi pass-through, just because the way our system works, does represent about 85% or more of that total cost for Go Raleigh Access. So that's actually on-street service cost. We do work with the contractor to develop that program and to administer that program. So that would be an expense that they would incur, but from a taxi standpoint, that would be a direct cost back to us, along with any, and then we would actually pay administrative overhead for the services as part of the actual contract itself. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background there because that is a not non-traditional, but it's a little bit different than most agencies nationally of how they run their paratransit, or at least their ADA paratransit.
And just for the record, these are not new dollars that will be needed. These are all existing dollars that are already budgeted and programmed to fund the systems as they exist today. Obviously, there will be a little bit of an increase due to the change in the type of contract, but for the most part, these numbers are already budgeted and programmed.
And I'm sorry, David, you're getting tired of me. For FY23, which we are in and ends June 30, we did anticipate this new contract structure, so we did build in additional funds because we know that that's just reality. A operations and maintenance service fee contract is going to be more than a management fee structured. Usually, not always, but usually. So we did account for that. So we think that we're good within existing budget structure for FY23. Once we know the final, obviously with these numbers, they will certainly help us develop the FY24 budget. But anyway, just want to explain how that works. So we don't think there'll be a amendment required for 23, and we're in budget development for FY24 currently.
And with that, we'll pose questions. I'm going to go ahead and show the next slide because it does show what the recommendation would be and what the motion would be if you were to make that motion today. So the staff and review team recommendation request that the highest scoring company, RATP Dev US Incorporated, per the bid tab calculations, be recommended to City Council for contract award. And your motion could read, recommend approval of the operations maintenance contract with RATP Dev US Incorporated to the Raleigh City Council.
Thank you. Well, I have a few questions, but I know that Jen attended all of the interviews, so I wanted to get her perspective.
Thank you. I did have time to go to the interviews, and I think my ranking would have been different, but I think that the interviews were only a piece of what the technical team was reviewing. So that's my just caveat for my impressions being different. I think coming out of the interviews, I felt like, wow, all four of the presentations had strengths. The strongest interviewers, in my opinion, were RATP Dev and MV. And that was because they both had good answers for how they wanted to interact with the union. They had good answers for how they care about employees. They didn't just say they cared. They gave wage examples. They gave personal anecdotes and had strong local team presence in their presentations. The other two presentations also, had good elements to them. Obviously, everyone presented their best when coming to the interviews. And like I said, those are my big picture impressions of who performed well. I think I'm curious. I guess those are my impressions. I'll save my questions for after yours.
We don't have to go in order. Does anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. I'm sorry I was late, so I missed something that I was wondering, and I'm wondering if it was answered. Was this a unanimous recommendation or by the team?
Five of the six scored RATP Dev the highest. The sixth one had another company first, RATP Dev, and a third company tied for second with only, I think, a 1.5 point difference between first and second and third.
Okay,
So they were pretty much all tied.
thank you.
Are there any, so I see that they have glowing recommendations, and I think that's great, but did you all find anything in the process that maybe gave pause? Are there any cons to the company? Areas of growth?
Through the process, I would say no. I don't know that there was anything that the review team had any major concerns about. We felt like their proposal was very well written. I'll say they were the only one that provided a 75-page document, and everybody else went way over. So they listened to us when we asked, to provide a document with 75 pages. They did what we asked in letting their local management team do most of the presentation. Others did some did much less, but they presented almost the entirety of the presentation, which gave the review team a very good feel for how that local management would operate.
I have a couple questions. Just sort of perusing their website, it looks like RATP Dev doesn't operate a system as large as Go Raleigh in the U.S. Is that correct?
They do operate Charlotte. However, that is as a management contract down there, but they do manage that.
And it's fewer buses or fewer routes. It looks like it's only 35 routes, according to their website.
What, you're talking about for Charlotte?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they break that out, but obviously, yeah, Charlotte's significantly larger than we are, but I would have to check on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the number of buses and employees that they listed under that contract was double or triple what the city of Raleigh would be.
Okay. The $68 million per year, granted, understanding that O&M is larger, and I really wish that Josh was here. How much does that differ for each annual budget? For, say like FY23 or FY22, how is that different? Yeah.
Yeah, so we, for FY23, with an assumption that we were hoping that we would have actually, gotten this completed back, I guess, probably, we did 9 months, I believe, budget for the new contract structure. So we budgeted 9. We're probably going to have, less than 6, 3, probably to be realistic in that new contract structure. But we budgeted just because of looking at other management and operations types of contracts, around. We budgeted 15% higher in FY23 than we did in 22. So that wasn't any type of service change. That was basically accounting for our normal 2 to 3% inflation plus a 15% contract change. Generally, I wouldn't say that's across the board, but if you looked at our budgets and their public documents in FY23 compared to 22, that's what it reflects. We certainly think that these are going to be, within that realm. But, again, this proposal, as stated earlier, we thought was not conservative, but very, but competitive at the same time. Well, we know that there will be expenses out there that need to be taken care of, and this budget seems to have the capacity to do that. Whereas, quite honestly, sometimes you have fear that that's not the case.
I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
That doesn't answer my question at all. I'm sorry. I understand that you guys budgeted for that. I get that. What I'm asking is, how does this compare on average to what we've been spending? Like, how much of an increase do we see for O&M versus the management. Knowing that it would be larger, we understand, and I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm actually looking at it from a standpoint of, is there room to grow, or are we looking at this as it's significantly more and, you know, everyone's sort of grabbing their collars, or is this sort of like, oh, great, this is good, so that when we put our budget in next year, we're asking for a little bit more so that we can continue to grow, like, you know, the $150 million that we are owed from Wake Transit Plan for marketing or stuff like that, that, you know, those sorts of, not 150 million, 150,000. I would like 150. But like those sorts of things that we, you know, how does that compare?
Look, I think we need to be careful when we start talking about the financials, because this is step one. We have to go through contract negotiations. We have to have an award from City Council. And until we have that final award, if things were to fall apart and this broke down and our ATP dev did not end up being the first choice and we had to go to the second choice, and we start negotiating with them all over. So if we start talking about the financials today, then that gives the second person that you may go to somewhat of an advantage in their negotiations. So I think I can say, and David, smack me if I shouldn't say this, but the budget that they submitted, or the pricing proposal submitted, is within the budget that we have programmed for FY23.
That's what I said, yeah.
And we did ask for.
So it's not Mama Bear, Papa Bear. We think it's probably Baby Bear. It's about just right. So, but we know that there's, you know, room for growth there. So we feel confident that it's right sized.
And this is a suggested 5-year contract with options for two-year extensions. We ask for pricing for all 5 years. So each individual year, there are increases to account for payroll increases, you know, inflationary increases, you know, all those things are programmed in their proposal. So there is definitely room for growth, you know, within what they're proposing, because they're budgeting increases each year, as all the proposers did.
I have a question. So compared, and I know it said that it was competitive but not conservative, were they the highest of all the contractors?
Yes, I would say that, yeah, they weren't the highest and certainly not the lowest.
Okay.
And there was actually a pretty big range there. So I'll just leave it at that.
Can we get a copy of the metrics that you all used to score the companies? I'm curious about, just so we can see it, because as we look at the rankings, or if you all can answer the question of it, I'm curious as how TransDev came out to number 2.
You said it, I didn't.
All I'll say is that we had a review team of 6 transit professionals that reviewed and read the proposals that were provided. We listened to the interviews. We had conversations. We used ourselves, and Wake County used themselves as a reference. We used the references that we received, and the scoring came out the way the scoring came out.
I understand. I find it curious.
And getting into the details of the bid tab at this point is, you know, again, something we probably should not do, because the what if, you know, if something were to happen and we didn't move forward with the first choice, then we still have to hire somebody, and you go to number 2, or you go to whatever that looks like. So, you know, that's, we typically would not release the bid tab until we had a signed contract.
Can the authority see a copy of the scoring sheet, the metrics that you all use to pick?
Those have been provided. I mean, we've provided those in the past during previous meetings and committee meetings, but we can provide those categories again, and the percentages for each.
I know that we've seen them before. I'm just curious as to, is there no way, so you're saying that we have to wait till the contracts are signed to see how everybody ranked out and what it looked like for all the scoring of each company?
That would be at the direction of our procurement department. You don't release documents prior to a final contract.
The last question I have is how did our RITP dev come out with regards to their way of handling and managing operators and hiring and retention and those issues that the board has been sort of asking about. And I know there were a lot of questions from union and riders and others. Yeah, I'm just curious how that sort of came out.
I don't know if Jen wants to speak up since she was there and she's a member at the table to kind of speak on what she heard. But you know what the review team heard was a very favorable response to those questions that you just asked. Their general manager was very people oriented in the comments that he was making. I stressed the recruiting and hiring and retention of drivers. We had that conversation because we've got a lot of service sitting on the shelf parked right now, and myself and my team are anxious to get that out on the road just as quickly as we can, and we can't do that until we have the drivers. So we have relayed that message to all four companies during the interviews, and we will continue to push that just as hard as we can. The city is committed to providing additional funding on advertising and the ads that are out there today. I think we just placed about $10,000 or maybe $20,000 of additional funding on an ad so that it sticks at the top every time you do a search for driver. So we are assisting and committed to make sure we get properly staffed so our operators aren't being overworked, and we want to make sure we get where we need to be as quickly as we can. And the city and I think all of the companies showed obvious confirmation that they understand that's a priority.
I'll just echo some of that. First of all, Mr. Walker definitely was very clear with all of the companies on the interview that's the most important question. I think the Teamsters Union questions, the ATU questions, the review board's questions all talked about it. It was asked more than once. And then MV and RATP had brought it up they presented first, and then we got to questions, and they actually are the only two that really brought it up before being asked. And I think, that being said, I think TransDev actually had the most thorough answer of how to hire and retain, which is probably just because they are on the ground already. But it does beg the question of why are we where we are if you have that thorough of an answer. And then I would just add that I think MV mentioned that an impressive statistic that they had 90% of their staff filled. I don't know if that speaks to the difference between paratransit and fixed route operations and the kind of requirements for operators there. But I definitely know that we covered the question well, and I think whoever would come into this new contract understands that. I think at one point, Mr. Walker, in an interview, was like, we have projects on the shelf that have funding, and we need to be able to drive those buses, and was really explicit about it. So definitely thank you for representing what we need as a system.
That just makes me more confused as to how TransDev was number 2. Were we just going?
Well, hopefully we only have to worry about number 1.
I know, I'm just curious if in the event that we do have a number 2, and if they're number 2, then, I'm not going to belabor the point. Never mind. Anybody else have any questions?
Don't put that you're doing.
I'm not going to do it. Okay, never mind. All right, thank you all.
I do have a question.
Yeah, I think I have
Just
questions.
in terms of, because you mentioned the 5-year contract, 2-year increments for renewal, so that would be across the board for whoever we decided to go to. But do we know if there's going to be any language included in the contract that if performance metrics are not met, concerns those types of things, will we be able to have the ability to come out of that contract sooner than the 5 years?
every contract the city has, I'm quite sure every contract that Wake County has does have a termination clause. So you could, certainly exercise that when and if you ever felt the need to do that.
Yeah, so above the liquidated damages and also the incentives. I don't want to make it sound like we have just liquidated damages. We also have, incentives. But beyond that, yes, all of our contracts do contain a termination for default. So if they reach certain, thresholds that are defined as default within the contract, then that keys a termination. And then there's also a termination for convenience within the contracts as well. Certainly, we want to protect them and us to make sure that that's a controlled occurrence. But there is also usually a termination for convenience as well.
And then the only other thing I had a question about was, in hearing some of the questions and the feedback that they provided during the interviews, it sounds like we were more focused on who's the best fit, who can do the job. Were there any questions or conversations about future states, so kind of the vision, where the opportunities, next 6 months, a year, what that would look like if we were to go with someone like our ATP Dev or any other management company?
There certainly were conversations to that effect. Forgive me for not being able to quote a whole lot for any individual company. We went through 4 interviews all in the same week, and we read a lot of documents and a lot of text pages. But I think all 4 companies did provide a good vision for the future and where their company wants to go and how they want to take care of their employees.
Yeah, I would just say that they certainly, again, recommend or recognize the labor market issues, as well as, also recognize, the changing technologies that we're dealing with right now. We are trying to advance. Well, obviously, we've got CNG. That CNG will be renewable CNG, hopefully, in the very near future. And as we implement that renewable CNG, we'll continue to expand our electric fleet as well. We don't want to do that too fast because the electric fleets still have a little bit of a challenge with range and other issues. It is a newer technology. But they seem to, grasp the national trends that are tripping up agencies currently, which again is labor and technology. And then, what just types of supports are there, whether that's software or other innovations that can just make operations and employee satisfaction better. So. And just for clarification, I was not a reviewer. I didn't provide any numbers or anything like that. I did sit in the back, kept my mouth shut. Jen can attest, but.
And we kicked him out as well as everybody else when we got to our debriefs.
Yes, they did.
I have 3 questions. One maybe for David Eatman. The first is, what other transit systems is RTP Dev currently managing? And also, have they done any managing with a bus rapid transit system, and did any of the applicants have that experience?
So our ATP Dev does hold contracts in Charlotte, Greensboro, Asheville, and Buncombe County, which I believe is Boone, in North Carolina. It's somewhere. That's Asheville. Asheville, okay, yeah. So they have 4 existing contracts within North Carolina today. They have about, I can't remember the exact total, but it was 35 or 36 contracts nationwide. And forgive me if I'm pretty sure they have BRT. If not in the States, in some of their nationwide contracts, they are a nationwide company or a worldwide company. So if there's not a contract in the States where they operate BRT, there's definitely one overseas.
Okay, thanks. My second question is, when you present this to the city council, we have 4 new members of the city council who have had no oversight at all in the past that I know of with transit, and this is a big decision for them to make. And certainly, I think our board over the last few years has grown increasingly concerned with our current management company. And so what I'm wondering is, when you present to them, I mean, you know, if they're a new city councilor, they're probably going to say, okay, well, I trust the team. And, you know, I'm not saying they shouldn't, but I would think it would be helpful to share some of the concerns that we've heard here in our meetings, in public hearings, with the current management company. And perhaps one of the reasons why Transdev wasn't number one.
So we'll have a work session with council on the 13th. So we'll be presenting then. That will not be the actual item, and then we'll be taking it from their direction and the manager's office direction. We'll be taking this either as a report of the city manager, or it would be, which I very, very much doubt, a consent item. But that would be the two options to take it when we actually take it to council. But we will also have a work session in advance of a council meeting.
Where they can ask questions.
That is correct.
But my question is, it might not occur to a lot of new members of the city council to even ask about any issues with the current management system.
Yeah, I think that we'll certainly make sure that we talk about a wide array of things, whether they're, just our influences general, whether it's labor, whether it's, attendance with comments at a transit authority. So I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out yet. We haven't finished that presentation, to be completely honest. But we've got a lot of backup or a lot of information to relay to council in a very short period of time. So we have to go from everything to let's go Raleigh to we're going to award a contract. And we don't have a lot of time to do that. So, but point well taken. We'll certainly do our best.
I think City Council will be looking to this board and the recommendation that you make, much more so than they would be looking to staff. You have been the parties at this table listening to all of those concerns that you discussed and taking all of those things into account when you look at the recommendation that the review team has made and making the decision whether or not you move that forward or not. And if you decide to move that forward, then, their trust is in you as a Transit Authority board member who they appointed to do the right thing.
Do we get to meet them at some point and have a conversation with them? Or is that just something that city council gets to do?
So there is not a meeting with them prior to award. After award, you may get tired of them. Obviously, they're going to have many visits. That was one of the strong suits of their proposal was their overall team, not just the local team, but their overall support for their local team. So we would expect large opportunity and many opportunities to become familiar with their corporate staff as well as their local.
I'll just follow that up with, they do have a corporate staff member here in the audience today. He has been at multiple meetings over, since the beginning of summer throughout this process. You may recognize him. It's not appropriate for him to come up and speak because we're still in the procurement process, but they have been here listening, hearing those things that, your concerns, and so I think they fully understand the concerns that you have.
My only last comment I think that I have is that whomever they sub to for the paratransit, I would like, and being that they're viewing that as the DBE, it would also be nice that they look locally, and that they do that because we have had a terrible track record of finding local DBE companies actually participating. So that's it.
Okay, my one last question is, did they say any parts of a plan to increase staff?
Yeah, I think as Jen stated, they were one of the only two that actually brought that forward as part of their proposal before we started hammering home the questions about recruiting and making sure that you've
My
got.
question is, what were some of the examples? I guess I had worded it wrong. What were some examples that they gave about increasing staff? If either of you happen to remember.
Like David and I didn't bring all of my notes. It's hard to like make sure that I'm talking specifically, but if I recall, it was a lot about recruiting locally and making partnerships with like the trade schools and things like that to recruit from. Was one of the things they
I believe
emphasized.
you're right. That they were the one that talked about the trade schools, working with Wake Tech, potentially some local church, partnering with churches to make sure they're getting the word out.
It was a sort of grassroots approach. And I did have one other question. Specifically because it was brought up during public comment about the subcontracting out, and you were talking about there being options for the DBE goal. Obviously, we want to hold that goal, and if there's a contractor that's meeting that goal, it's there for a reason. But I also see why it's a point of tension because of the unknowns that are involved. So I'm just curious from a process perspective, as this goes into contract negotiation, if there's room, like you said, for flexibility around that selection, how does that come back to this body, or how does that come back to staff? What's the process there?
I mean,
Our ATP Dev has let it be known that they are flexible. If we make a request and we need to change something, they will work with us. We will work with them. If we need to, in support of the Teamsters, concerns about that DBE coming in, if we needed to just request our ATP Dev remove that and just make everybody our ATP Dev employees, that's something that we could make happen. Does that answer your question?
Sure. To an extent, I understood the flexibility. I guess I was asking a procedural question. Does that come down to staff and the contract negotiations? Do the Teamsters get a chance to understand that? And at what point? Does this board get a chance to understand that? And at what point? Does that make sense?
We would handle that throughout the final contract negotiations. Our ATP Dev will be meeting with and holding conversations and renewing the existing language in the current contracts that are already developed. So they will be communicating with both unions throughout the entire process. So they will know in step probably before we do.
Okay. And then we as a body make a recommendation to council for who to enter contract negotiations with. And then at some point a contract's been negotiated and then it just happens, or this comes back again.
So the recommendation would be approving our ATP Dev as to move forward as the highest scored firm, and for City Council to make that award to this company.
And as that goes to council, normally the council item says, execute contract with selected firm based upon the final terms as determined by the city manager and the city attorney's office. Once that is completed, we'll be happy to share that. That's a public document anyway. So we'll certainly be bringing that back to make sure you understand what's in there and what the obligations are, what the terms are. Obviously, it shouldn't be anything major or different from what we've talked about today. But that is a decision point about that DBE piece. That doesn't mean that we can't seek other avenues to reach our disadvantaged business enterprise goal. We can still look for, whether it's parts or other materials, but you have to understand that a transit system is about 70 to 75% labor driven, because our cost, that's the major cost, just like the city of Raleigh. I mean, the city of Raleigh's largest expense is it's human assets, and those are extremely important. And when you have an overall goal of your total, of your program at 13%, you know what I mean? It's harder to meet that 13% when you just are trying to put that towards supplies, materials, other, elements. So I just wanted to put that out there. Now, as an overall transit program, we look at just not overall contracts per se, but we look at our federal dollars. So basically, our DB goal of 13% is against federal contracting opportunities. So if they're non-federal contracting opportunities, then we don't necessarily have to count that. So again, there is flexibility in this. I'll just default back to that we can either use the DB sub, or we can certainly talk with our ATP dev and, potentially not. That is certainly on the table. Would love to hear your thoughts if you have any today. But I think that it might be good for us to do, a little bit of background work and make sure that we do our homework. And we'll be happy to, bring back our findings and thoughts at the next meeting. Now, if we do take this January 3rd, that does come after, obviously, the council meeting, because they don't meet. They only meet once in December, and that was this week. So we can relay that process or that work that we're doing via email, or if you would like to hold a special meeting. It's hard to beat the 3rd, because the 3rd is like the day we come back from vacation. So that's a tough one. But we'll, however the board may, like for us to relay how we eventually move forward with that. And certainly if anyone has particular comments, they can certainly provide it to David Walker, which is the clearinghouse for all questions regarding the RFP.
I just wanted to note, sometime earlier, we had a conversation regarding route and policy finance, working with staff on specific items for the contracting, not necessarily being part of the contracting, but we still stand to expect that to be held up by staff.
Oh, yes, most definitely. I mean, those are the elements that we're talking about with the liquidated damages as well as the incentives. Many of those relate directly back to what David Walker was talking about, which is, labor and making sure that we're tracking, what is the pulse of labor within the work group? How can that be improved? So working with that throughout the contract term. So we heard that loud and clear in every intent to make sure that that's in the contract.
Just a really quick point of correction. We also, though, can present by the 17th, because though the city council meets on the 3rd, they also meet the 17th.
That is correct. If you do meet on the 17th, it would require a special meeting of the first week in January. So that would be, the 3rd is on a Tuesday, so that would be the week of the 1st. Yes, starting on Sunday, January, that would be the week of the 1st.
And the reason that the board meeting would need to be moved up is because we would have to submit the city council agenda item for the 17th on the following Monday after.
Yeah, we would actually have to submit the agenda item on the council, or the day before, on council day, which would be January 3rd, for the next council meeting. We would have about 24 hours to withdraw that. Maybe 48. So that means the meeting would have to be Wednesday or Thursday of that council week. If you wanted to, again, roll that back to the 17th.
And the work session is December what?
13th.
13th. And
Is that correct? Mr. Walker, now I'm getting confused with my dates and my head's gone. 13th. At 13th. All right.
will anyone from staff be briefing Councilor Corey Branch before the work session about this? And I ask because he is our representative and he's not here today and he wasn't on the team.
If you'd like for me to, I certainly can.
I just think it would be prudent and helpful because I'm going back to all these new city councilors who have no history, and I think that they would be looking to him since he's our liaison. Or
We can certainly do that.
I have one other question, if I can still ask. Does RATP Dev, did they speak to, and was this one of the questions for all of the companies regarding their diversity policy, particularly at the management level? Do you know if they have one, a goal or anything?
Yeah, they definitely do. I think all 4 of the companies were asked that question because one of our panelists is on a similar committee for Wake County. And so that was one of her regular questions. But forgive me, I can't quote what was said, but I do know that they all four had, diversity,
Equity and inclusion. Yep.
committees that included not only corporate staff, but employees from around the country.
Having asked the process question about how the contract will be gone through with staff with lots of feedback, and seeing the rankings of the other recommendations. So I'm not sure that additional time to deliberate is necessary. I think that, if RATP Dev, came out on top of the technical expertise, I think from a personal standpoint, they presented themselves very well, and would represent Go Raleigh well. So I would be comfortable making the motion to recommend them as the company, with the understanding that some of the concerns that the Teamsters have brought to the table are very important to the board, and should be addressed by them as they go through not only contract negotiations, but collective bargaining agreements that will come up next year.
Any other comments?
I would agree also with Jen's comments. I think a part of this process, it seems like the staff and the review team have gone through the rigor that's needed to be able to interview these different companies, and the fact that we're going with the highest scoring company as part of our recommendation, I think is a good thing for us to be able to make a motion and maybe able to come to a decision on. I would say that it would be helpful if this does go through for us to then have a deeper understanding, again, of like the vision, the future, the content that was shared that really set RATP Dev, which is hard for me to say for some reason, apart. Just, I know it's a little confusing now because you're presenting these different options, but if this is the company that we're going forth with, it would be helpful to know a little bit more about the conversations and the things that help set them apart going forward in the future. So, but I agree to your point, Jen. I think we have a ability to we don't need a separate meeting.
With the board's request, we'll be happy to, I'm sure they would be happy to be here. So if you would like that, we can certainly make sure that we work towards January to make that occurrence. Again, you could keep your regular meeting date if that goes to council on the 3rd. But if it goes on the 17th, we would, again, need to move back the RTA meeting date. But at that point, they wouldn't be able to come. So they can, if it goes to council on the 3rd, they can actually come to RTA. If we wait to the 17th, they would be able to be here in February.
All right, are there any other questions, comments? All right, who would like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion to recommend approval of the operations and maintenance contract with RATP Dev to the Raleigh City Council, with the understanding that we're hearing concerns from operators and the public.
Second. You have any time for comment? You have a comment?
I was seconding.
Okay. So it's been moved and properly second. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. We recommend approval of the operations and maintenance contract with RATP Dev USA Inc. to the Raleigh City Council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a long process.
Thank you for all the
Thank
hard
you.
work and all the others on the team.
And I'll give a quick time point stamp. It is 4:55, and we've got people in the hall waiting to walk in at 5 o'clock. So we do have a hard stop.
They knew that they'd messed up, so they gave us to 5:30, but actually the hearings are scheduled to start at 5.
Okay, well, looks like we'll have to hold off everything else on the agenda until our January Transit Authority meeting. And at that meeting, we'll also go ahead and, we already did the minutes, so we should be good there. So we'll hold off everything else on the agenda, from the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan to the Zero Emissions Transit Plan. And we had one committee note, committee meet this month with the route committee.
Yeah, and I just wanted to note to everyone, I'll send an email, but there is a bus plan update, and we do have notes about it, and we are making recommendations.
And Nathan, is there a deadline for your report on that we need to hear by?
No, public
January,
comments in
okay.
January, so we've got time.
We're okay? Okay.
All right, perfect. Are there any other questions or any other comments?
Can we make sure that the radio stuff is on the agenda next month?
Oh, yeah, David. Somebody, can we make sure that the information?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No problem.
My
Can we
apologies.
make sure that the open radios that continuing that conversation is on the agenda for January?
We can put that back on there. We did send out information. Obviously, we provided to council with some background on that. So that'll be the base information. So please read through that. But yes, we can put that on there.
All right, perfect. So I'll call this meeting to close at 4:59 on December 8th.
said, Wes Tripp, the standing chair, is excused on his absence. At this time, we'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, to sign in here at the front table. The agenda and staff reports are all available online on Board Docs. Hopefully you've had a chance to review them if you needed to review those prior to this meeting. There's also a handout available on the meeting procedure if you need to understand anything about our protocols here at the COA meeting. The Raleigh Historic Development Commission is a city council approved appointed membership. Commissioners include residents of the historic districts, architects, intern architects, architectural consultants and contractors, attorneys and historians, urban planners, and historic preservationists. At this time, we'll introduce the commissioners and our attorneys and staff support that are all here to help us. Barden, why don't we start with you? We'll start at this end and come across. 30 seconds? What? Yeah.
Barden Colbreth, formerly the chair of the Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board, living in Idlewild.
Jordan Ryland, 15-year resident of Raleigh, local architect.
And I'm Francis Raspberry. I'm not a member of the commission, but I'm legal counsel to the COA committee.
I'm Rob Allen. I'm a senior associate at a commercial architecture firm focused mostly on project management. I'm one of probably a dying breed of Raleigh natives and also a resident of the Boylan Heights Historic District.
My name is John Reese. I am a registered architect in the state of North Carolina. I live in the Raleigh historic neighborhood of Glenwood, Brooklyn. I've been a resident of Raleigh since 1996.
Curtis Casefang. I'm an architectural consultant, former chair of the commission, and I live in the Oakwood Historic District.
This time we'll have staff introduce themselves, if you don't mind.
Good evening. My name is Erin Morton. I am staff to the RHDC and have a master's in historic preservation.
And I am Colette Canane, also staff. I have been with the City of Raleigh for about 5 years, and I also have a master's in historic preservation.
Thank you. The minutes from our prior certificate of appropriate meeting on October 27th have been posted online. At this time, I'm going to make a motion to waive reading of the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Seems unanimous. Unopposed. Any corrections or additions? I'm going to make a motion to adopt the minutes as posted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed? So. Oh, okay. Thanks, John. Let the minutes reflect John Reese made the motion. Thank you. The agenda for today's meeting, December 8th, COA meeting, has been posted online. I'd like to make a motion to approve the final agenda as posted.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Curtis made a motion to approve.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. At this time, before we go into any of the cases, we do have an announcement of the continuance of the hearings due to the holidays. Our regularly scheduled COA meetings that were scheduled for both Thanksgiving and December fall on common holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and as a result, we're combining them into one meeting. However, due to the number of applications, we're going to span this meeting over two time periods. This evening, December 8th, and tomorrow, Friday, December 9th, have both been set aside for the committee's meeting and the included evidentiary hearings. For everyone's convenience, only the first 5 cases on the agenda listed on the agenda will be heard this evening, and those include the first case on the agenda, COA-0112-2022, 529 Euclid Street. The second case is COA-0113-2022, that's 921 West South Street. The third case will be COA-0126-2022, and that's 2307 Van Dyke Avenue. The fourth case tonight will be COA-0131-2022, and that's 1026 Dorothea Drive. The final and fifth application we'll hear this evening is COA-0135-2022, and that's 603 Northeast Street. At the conclusion of the hearing of these 5 cases tonight, the session will be recessed and continued to recommence tomorrow morning, December 9th at 9 a.m. here in the City Council chambers. So if anyone present this evening is in connection with cases other than those first 5 that I mentioned, your case will not be heard tonight. After tonight's cases are heard, the hearing will be recessed and continued again at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So your case, if it's any of those last 4 cases, will be heard tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. At this time, we'll hear a list of the minor work applications processed in the past month.
Staff approved 10 minor works this month.
Thank you, Aaron. We're now ready to hear the certificate of appropriateness applications. Prior to the meeting, notice has been sent to property owners within 100 feet of the properties in question. Legal ad placed and signage has been posted at the property. Commission members receive access to a copy of each application, staff reports, and were to have visited each property prior to this evening's meeting. Staff reports were made publicly available with the online agenda, and North Carolina law provides that major work applications must be approved in an evidentiary hearing, and that persons have an opportunity to address the application if they desire. We are now ready to conduct the evidentiary phase of the meeting. And evidentiary hearings are conducted in a quasi-judicial format. During the hearing, we'll receive evidence to determine that the proposed changes are not incongruous with the special character of the district or the historic property. We review this evidence against guidelines referenced in the city ordinance before issuing a certificate of appropriateness. Each application is heard the same way as listed in the meeting procedure handout. The quasi-judicial format of the hearing requires that we be impartial, and the written staff reports are evidence presented just as any other evidence, and were made available to us, the application, and the public at the same time. If any of us have had reason to discuss specific details of an application prior to today, we'll be asked to be excused from hearing that application. There's no time limit to the testimony, but we do ask that you limit repetition in your comments. Because of the quasi-judicial format of our hearings, whereby the commission hears evidence and then judges whether the changes are not incongruous, we're required by North Carolina law to affirm or swear in persons that speak before the commission and offer evidence. All speakers will be affirmed at the beginning of each case. Staff will be sworn in and affirmed now for all the cases on the agenda this evening. Colette, would you mind? Do you solemnly swear? Would you raise your hand? And do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thanks. And Aaron, would you raise your hand? Do you solemnly swear to affirm that the testimony you're about to give on the matters on today's agenda is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. We'll now begin calling cases forward. We'll start with the first case, which is COA 0112-2022, 529 Euclid Street. At this time, I'm going to ask if any member of the committee has an interest in the matter or otherwise feels that they cannot be impartial or fair in hearing the case? Hearing no. I will state for the record that the applicant's architect and myself used to work together and we were friends, but we have not spoken about this or any other cases prior to this evening, so I feel like I can act impartial when reviewing the case.